We are in a new series called Chains Be Broken because we are working our way through the Gospel of Luke, and this is actually going to be the last 12 weeks. So you get to look at this for the next 12 weeks. How's that? It's kind of cute, though. We've never really done these colors. I was kind of like super excited about that. Okay, my grandmotherly skills. You are going to love this. My grandmother, it was horrible. Okay, so here's the deal. My granddaughter is Briley. She turned 3. So they invited us to like a little birthday party. But here's the deal. It was my son and his wife and the little girls and the other grandparents and us. All right, so I'm in a meeting all day long. At like 3:30, I realized, oh my gosh, I have to be there at 5. I don't even have a present. I go running into the mall. I'm like, oh, she'd love Build-A-Bear, thinking I could get like a big Build-A-Bear something. No, it's a little card, like a little gift card like this, in a little teeny tiny blue envelope. There you go, there it is. But that looks large. Imagine that with one little tiny gift card in it, okay? So I come in, I'm just like, oh, okay, well, she'll never know the difference. So then I walked out and came back, and the other set of grandparents were there. Look what they brought. Yeah. Okay, like presents and bears and balloons. And I was like, oh, for the love, I'm the worst grandparent in the world. Oh, it was horrible. Like, here, Briley, here's your little gift card. Of course, she doesn't even know what it is, so whatever. Then we had a big party on Sunday, not for her, because we have people in from out of town. We made all these brownies, and I just ate brownies all day, and I was so sick. So Monday morning, I decided that I'm just clearly never, ever going to eat another brownie in my life. But of course, Monday morning wakes up, and you're all renewed to eat another brownie. And so I decided to get healthy, so this is what I ate. I put strawberries on it. Ice cream brownies and strawberries. And I'm like, oh, you girls will be so proud of me that I had strawberries. Okay, we got to get going. We have a big lesson today. If you haven't seen the set, it's not going to make any sense unless you actually see it. So when you're done, and none of it's going to make sense today, you can come up and look at it, and hopefully it'll help you. All right, here's the deal. Normally, we go through something each day, or each time we come here, like, hey, today we're talking about faith, or today we're talking about joy, or what. We have a subject. So today will probably be the last day that we do that, because we literally have 12 weeks to finish Luke. And that means we're going to have 2 videos, maybe 3 videos a day. We're going to have to just power through it for the next. But today, we needed to have our own lesson. And we're going to talk about heaven, and we're going to talk about hell, and we're going to talk very little about heaven, and we're going to talk a whole lot about hell. Because I had never studied this before. And I was just telling Jeannie today when I walked in, I said, I usually go through the lesson, and I do it out loud. A couple times, I did it once and cried through the entire half of the section. And I said, I can't do that, and because it was so emotional for me. I can't even explain that. So I just wanted to change us. I wanted to change how we look at the people that are around us and the world and what happens to people when they die without Jesus. And so I want to really, that's where we're going to head today. There was a church, and just so you know this, jokes, try finding jokes on hell. There aren't many of them, I'm telling you that, okay? So this is just kind of serious, and everyone's going to hate it, and hopefully not. I'm hoping you learn as much as I did from it. There was a church that was trying to hire a pastor, and they had 2 pastors, and they asked them both to do a sermon on hell. And one of the pastors, they gave the job. And the other pastor came and said, why in the world did you give it to him and not me? And they said, because when you preached on hell, you seemed to enjoy it. To where he preached on hell and he seemed brokenhearted. And see, that's what I want from us today. Because we live in this flippant society where we're just like, oh, you just need to go to hell, or you're not even worthy of going to hell. Or, it's just that, it's our society. And I want us to really understand what that means. And it's terrifying, and it's something that you and I, as followers of Christ, we have something to share with people so they never have to spend eternity there. And that's going to be our job. Now, I'm going to show you real quick in your handouts. All of these 3 pictures are in your handout. They're also on the video, but I want you to really, now that we're getting into Jerusalem, I want you to see these places because they're so incredibly cool. I want you to look first at your map. And I want you to look to the right of your map, and you can see up there the Mount of Olives is on the right. Now, in the Bible, you always see Jesus, like, Jesus is on the Mount of Olives, and he's looking over, the temple, and he's all of these, so get that as your point. If you look down, you see that dome on the rock right there. That wasn't there at the time of Jesus, but the big, Herod's temple was. Now, if you're sitting on the Mount of Olives looking down, or if you're just looking at it on your screen, look to the very bottom, that round thing that says David's Palace. Right above that, you see some stairs. I don't know what it says because I don't have my glasses on. It says the what? Southern, what is it? Well, it's the southern steps, but then it says double gate, single gate, triple gate. Now, where I videotaped today is actually, I'm sitting on those steps. And you're going to actually be able to see what used to be the double gates and the triple gates. And it's like so incredibly awesome. So I wanted you to see this. The next picture here is what Herod's temple would have probably looked like. If you're looking at that picture to the left, that side is where these steps are. And then if you see this next picture here, that's what they looked like back in the time of Jesus. He would have walked up the steps. They would go in. It was either the triple gates and come out the double, or it was opposite from that. So anyway, I want you to kind of get your bearings so when you see this video, you will understand what went on there. And then listen to the verses, and then we will just head on today. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us today for our Women's Bible Study. First, if you would like to know more about our ministry, you can go online to womensbiblestudy.com, and there you can find out everything you want to know about us. We teach Bible. That's what we do. We are actually here in Israel as we are working through the Gospel of Luke. We are here showing you all the different places as we study different scripture, and we're reading the scriptures from a place so that you can see that these are real, true places that attach to the Bible. So when you read the Bible, you know that what you're reading is actually proven archaeologically. Now today is such an exciting day. We're here in the Old City. We are sitting on the southern steps. You can be assured that Jesus actually walked up these steps. If you were here before 1980, these wouldn't have been here. This has just recently been excavated. This was just all covered in dirt, and they just found it. You'll see there's triple arches, there's double arches where people would have gone in, and then they would have come back out again. These stairs lead up to the southern side of the Temple Mount wall in Jerusalem. I have a map for you so you can actually see where we're at. If you look on your map, you'll see the Mount of Olives on the right, the bottom left, or the bottom right, but if you're looking from the Mount of Olives, it'll be the left-hand side. You'll see David's Palace and that round circle. Right above that, you'll see the double gate, the triple gate, and we're sitting right here on the southern steps. Like I said, it backs up now to the Al Aqsa Mosque. It's a Muslim mosque, so you can't go through anywhere on this particular side, but on this side, we can be assured that Jesus would have walked on these steps. Now, back then, it would have looked a lot like the U.S. Capitol steps going into this magnificent temple, and what makes it so special is that we know Jesus came here many times in his life. First, when Jesus was born, Mary and Joseph would have carried him up these particular steps for his dedication in Luke 2:22. Since these steps were a public entrance into the temple for commoners, it was certain that they probably walked right here. As Jesus grew up, his parents made this Jerusalem pilgrimage annually. Jesus was most likely with them. This is how they would have walked into the temple. Jesus watched Herod when he was building this place because it was so magnificent. Jesus probably watched as these walls went up and all the beautiful things that Herod was building around here. At 12, Jesus was here at the temple. He was somehow like a child prodigy, astounding teachers with what he knew. And this is the temple that he was at asking questions, as in Luke 2. And during the 3 years of his public ministry, he came here from Galilee to speak at the temple a lot. During those times, Luke said he'd teach at the temple every day. The southern steps would have been one likely place for him to teach because large crowds of both men and women could gather here. It was a little more segregated once you got into the temple. And so today we're going to read verses, and I want you to envision Jesus sitting right here on these steps with people watching. And we're going to read Luke 16, starting at verse 19. And by the way, it is super hot here, so just so you know, we're dying of heat. Let's read these verses really quick. Luke 16, verse 19. And now there was a rich man, and he habitually dressed in purple and fine linen, joyously living in splendor every day. And a poor man named Lazarus was laid at his gate, covered with sores, and longing to be fed with the crumbs which were falling from the rich man's table. Besides, even the dogs were coming and licking his sores. Now the poor man died and was carried away by the angels to Abraham's bosom. And the rich man also died and was buried. In Hades he lifted up his eyes, being in torment, and saw Abraham far away and Lazarus in his bosom. And he cried out and said, Father Abraham, have mercy on me, and send Lazarus so that he may dip the tip of his finger in water and cool off my tongue, for I am in agony in this flame. But Abraham said, Child, remember that during your life you received your good things, and likewise Lazarus bad things. But now he is being comforted here, and you are in agony. Besides all this, between us and you there is a great chasm fixed, so that those who wish to come over from here to you will not be able, and that none may cross over from there to us. And he said, Then I beg you, Father, that you send him to my father's house, for I have 5 brothers, in order that he may warn them, so that they might also come to this place of torment. But Abraham said, They have Moses and the prophets, let them hear them. But he said, No, Father Abraham, but if someone goes to them from the dead, they will repent. But he said, If they did not listen to Moses and the prophets, they will not be persuaded, even if someone rises from the dead. Okay, just an FYI, if you ever go to Israel, like the city, right, the old city, right, that where we're at, it's kind of like white limestone. So when that heat comes in the daytime with the sun, you literally just like that, you melt. So I say anything for you girls, though, okay? All right, so here's the deal. Last week we talked about being generous, and this is why we want to be generous, because we need people to find out about Jesus, and sometimes we know that costs money. Oh, by the way, we had donuts. Yay, donuts for all that yummy stuff, donuts and all that. So if you can just put extra money in the donation thing this morning, that would help. Also, for those of you, I never tell you this every once in a while, but if you watch us from any way, Roku, whatever, please go online and donate $5 a month. That's all we ask, because that helps us cover the costs for you to watch what we do here. So anyway, I thought this was a perfect time to actually say that. Anyway, the reason why we are generous is so that people can come to know Jesus, because what is at stake is what we just read, heaven and hell. And we don't want people to go to hell. There's a story about a message on a tombstone, and it said, Consider, young man, as you walk by, so you are now, so once was I. As I am now, soon you shall be, so prepare, young man, to follow me. And somebody was reading that, and they weren't really sure what that meant, so they wrote on the tombstone, scratched something with a knife, and said, To follow you is not my intent, until I know which way you went, okay? Because that's the whole key, and that's what we have to realize, is that there are 2 ways that you and I can go when we die. And one is spending eternity in heaven, and the other one is spending eternity in hell. There's no middle ground. There's no purgatory. There's no, the Mormons believe you can go and baptize someone for the dead. You can't do that. That's not, you can't get someone out of hell and put them someplace else. You can't do that. You and I are responsible each for our own particular life. When I was studying this, I was at the airport picking up Rob, and I was reading a book called 1 Minute After You Die, I think it was. And I literally had to put the book down, because it so made me so distraught, because I'm sitting here at the airport looking at all of these people, and they're all just running around, and they're going on vacation, and they're coming home, and they're at work, and everyone's busy, and I'm thinking, why is it that nobody's thinking about where they're going to spend eternity? They're so busy living the day-to-day life. And so today I want us to look at life a little bit differently, because there are people out there like Ted Turner who think this. In a speech to the National Press Club, Ted Turner said, Heaven is going to be a mighty slender place, and most of the people I know in life aren't going to be there. There are a few notable exceptions, and I'll miss them. Remember, heaven is going to be perfect, and I don't really want to be there. Those of us that go to hell, which will be most of us in the room, most journalists are certainly going there, but when we get to hell, we'll have a chance to make things better, because hell is supposed to be a mess, and heaven is perfect, and who wants to go to a place that is perfect? Boring, boring. And that should break our heart. Because I think that's what a lot of people think. It's very flippant. It's like, whatever happens when I die, who cares? I won't be around. And Jesus comes along and shows us what he did today with this whole story about Lazarus and the rich man, because he wants us to know that there is a way out, that there is a huge chasm that once you die, you can never, ever get out of. And so while you're living, you still have the chance to come to Jesus and to get right with God. And so Jesus wants us to know that today. And so that's going to be that Jesus says there's a very narrow way, and it's through him only. And so that's where, if you have never known that before, I'm hoping today that you get that out of this. C.S. Lewis saw a gravestone one time that says, "Here lies an atheist all dressed up and nowhere to go." And believe it or not, atheists believe that you don't go anywhere. The Bible doesn't say that. Hebrews 9:27 says this, "Just as people are destined to die once, and after that to face judgment." Now, Jesus is now, as we're going through Luke, he's on his way, going on to Jerusalem. He's coming up from down south in Galilee. He's coming up now, and he knows he's getting closer and closer to where he will die and be crucified on a cross. And so we've talked about the last few weeks that they're just not very fluffy anymore. It's not like, oh, I just want your life to be happy, and I just want you to have faith. We're seeing very difficult things like, if you want to follow Jesus, you need to count the cost. Because it's not this like, I just asked Jesus in my heart and I'm good and I can live however I want. That's not what following Jesus is all about. He talks about the narrow way. It's a very, very narrow way. We did this whole thing on all the religions of the world. So it's not very fluffy. It's getting more and more difficult as Jesus gets closer to dying on a cross because he's desperate for his disciples to know these things that he's about ready to say. Because eternity is at stake. And I think when we really grasp this, I think it might change the urgency we have for those around us and the people that we meet on a daily basis. So let's look at the scene real quick. There's two characters. There is a rich man and there is a poor man, Lazarus. The interesting part about this is not most people, it's really divided if you look at commentaries. Some people believe this actually was just a parable, not really a true story, just something that's going to give you an idea of what's going on. Other people believe it actually was a story about a man named Lazarus because Jesus' parables never have names attached to them. So I'm probably going to take that end of it. Anyway, there's a wealthy man. He probably owns a yacht and a beach house, and he's got this big mansion, and everything's great for him, and he's got a lot of money, but the problem with that is that he just doesn't care about anybody else. And then Jesus talks about Lazarus, who's a poor man that was laid at the gate of the rich man, and he was covered with sores. Look at verse 21. He says, "And longing to be fed with the crumbs which were falling from the rich man's table, even the dogs were coming and licking his sores." Now, Lazarus was a man that was in serious, serious need of help. And see, for you and I, that's hard for us to understand. Because if someone was like Lazarus laid at our front door, we would get him help. But we live in a world now where we have a million panhandlers. All you have to do is go down to Arrowhead Mall, and you just stand on 83rd Avenue, and you see everyone like, we'll work for food, and they hold up their signs. And we have no idea if they're making more money than we do in one day, or if they really do need help. Like, we can't distinguish that. But for this particular guy, like, he was very sick, and he had sores all over him, and he was in desperate need of a doctor. And this wealthy man, it wasn't like a panhandler. Like, he saw he was in need, and he did absolutely nothing. Then this is what happened in verse 22. "Now the poor man died and was carried away by the angels to Abraham's bosom." That's the only time that is in the Bible called Abraham's bosom, so we'll talk about that. "And the rich man also died and was buried in Hades. He lifted up his eyes, being in torment, and saw Abraham far away and Lazarus in his bosom." Now, I told you, I've never studied this before. And so I actually got in touch with a very, very strong Bible teacher he's just a well-known pastor. And I said, I'm coming down on this side of this, and I've never studied this, and I've never heard this before, so I don't even know if it's right. And I went through it with him, and he sent me articles, and he said, yes, that's exactly what I would take too. So here's where I want to go with this. Since they moved the lights, I'm not going to trip, hopefully. And I know some of you aren't going to be able to see this. Here's what Hades, let's start here. Hades. In the Bible, in the Old Testament, what happens is, the Old Testament, the word is Sheol. It's used 65 different times. And so what happens is, that's the word for the realm of the dead, for the departed souls. It's kind of like a chasm. It's something that's, it's just a kind of a dark place, but it's a place where when people die, their souls will go to Hades. Now, I always thought Hades was just hell, and that was the extent of my conversation on it. But here's the deal. What I realized is that in the Old Testament, and you got to realize this because Jesus has not died on a cross and has not risen from the dead yet. He's not conquered death. So as an Old Testament believer, if you were an old, like Abraham, Isaac, all of those people, they had to go someplace. And what we just saw in this story about Lazarus is that Lazarus went to a good place, and the rich man went to a bad place. But they were both in Hades. And I was so shocked at that. I was like, that doesn't even make any sense to me. But that seems to be, and we'll talk a lot about the verses that will show that to you. So what we need to see is that when people died in the Old Testament, they went to one of two places. But in our little story, the rich man over here could see over there. He could see what was going on, and that was what he said. There was a big chasm between the two. And that was so interesting to me. Now, I think the reason for this, notice how I depicted heaven, in Abraham's bosom and paradise, and I depicted it with cupcakes, okay? And if you want a cupcake, people are standing in it, but it's fine. But this is a happy place, okay? Over here is a good place. I don't know if you can see this. Over here is a bad place. They're all literally standing at these gates, and they want out, and they can't get out. There's this big chasm. They see over here, and they can't get this. I didn't know how to depict this. Fire, horrible, because that's how it's going to be. Over here, just happiness, family, I don't know, cupcakes. I don't know how to make that better. But anyway, that's kind of how it is. So as we're going through all these verses, understand that Sheol in the Old Testament is the same word for Hades in the New Testament. They mean the same thing. One is just in Hebrew, one is in Greek. Okay, so anyway, that whole Hades, the word, I had other words for you: ravine, chasm, underworld, world of the dead. Now, what's really interesting is that there's verses in the Bible that almost allude to the fact that Hades is in the middle of the earth. Because when you go, where's heaven, where's hell, I don't know. But look at these verses, it's really interesting. Numbers 16:31, there was a problem with this group of people, the sons of Korah, and in the Old Testament with Moses. And they wouldn't listen to what Moses said to say. And look at verse 31. As he finished speaking all these words, the ground that was under them split open. The earth opened its mouth, swallowed them up, and their households, and all the men who belonged to Korah with all their possessions. So they and all that belonged to them went down alive to Sheol, and the earth closed over them, and they perished from the midst of the assembly. And I thought, that's so interesting. Like, unless Sheol just means underground, who knows? 1 Samuel 28, Saul went to a medium because he wanted Samuel to come back he wanted to talk to the dead, basically. Bad deal, don't ever do that. But in this particular case, he went there and he went to this woman, and he says, the woman said, whom shall I bring up for you? He didn't say, like, who can I bring down? Like, it's as if it's this underground something that people have to come up out of. Isaiah 14:15 says, nevertheless, you will be thrust down to Sheol, to the recesses of the pit. And Job 26:5 says, the departed spirits tremble under the waters and their inhabitants. And I think, okay, a lot of our earth is filled with water, so that might make sense too. Now, look at Psalm 89:48, because it's kind of, and this is the problem with what we're talking about today. There's very few verses that talk about this. And so you try to take them all and try to mush them together and try to figure out what it really means. But when it's all said and done, the bottom line is you don't want to go to hell. And I think that's what we have to remember, that whether it works out this way and it works out this way, whatever, we know there's two places to go, and we want to do everything we can to stay out of the one. Psalm 89:48, what man can live and not see death? Can he deliver his soul from the power of Sheol? Every person that died seemed to go to Sheol. Genesis 49:33, when Jacob finished charging his sons, he drew his feet into bed and breathed his last and was gathered to his people. And so it's like Abraham went somewhere to be gathered to his people. But you also have to know he didn't go into the bad part of Hades because he was a believer. And so there has to be these two, and we see that in the story of Lazarus and the rich man, that the rich man could see, and he wanted to get what he could, but he couldn't. It was too late because of this chasm that was between the two. Genesis 15:15, as for you, you shall go to your fathers in peace. You will be buried at a good age. So the people in the Old Testament knew that there was life after death. They just didn't seem to be able to put it all together, because remember, Jesus had not conquered death yet. So this seems to be the Old Testament scenario. Now, it seems like in this Sheol or Hades, there was almost like different compartments. That's why I compartmentalized them like that. But it seems like there was maybe a lower part, an upper part. Look at this verse. For a fire is kindled in my anger and burns to the lowest part of Sheol. And so you kind of see that there might be just, like I said, different sections in this underground, whatever this looked like. And so we saw that in the story of Lazarus. Now, on this good side right here, Jesus called it Abraham's bosom. And it was interesting back then, and he probably did that because there was a lot of Jewish people that were watching him listening to him at that particular time. And so he was speaking to Jewish people. Now, in that particular culture, when you would have dinner, it wouldn't be like you girls are sitting around here right now. We would all, there would be no chairs. You would recline on your left arm and you would eat like this. I wonder what you'd do if you were left-handed. That would be kind of a problem. But for the moment, that's what they did. Now, if you were the guest of honor, you would sit very, very close. Sounds really creepy, actually. You'd sit very, very close to the guest, or the main guy, his bosom. So you would kind of lay together. It seems really weird, but that's what they did back then. So for them, when they heard that Lazarus went to Abraham's bosom, okay, that would make total sense to them. It sounds weird to us, but to them it makes total sense. They're like, what do you mean he would be the guest of honor? Because remember, the Pharisees think they're going to be the guest of honor. And Jesus is basically saying, you know that rich man who died? Yeah, that's you, Pharisees, because you got it all wrong. Lazarus, on the other hand, gets to go to the good place and be in peace and in happiness there. John 13:23, we can see this with Jesus. There was reclining on Jesus' bosom one of his disciples whom Jesus loved, and Simon Peter gestured and said, tell us who it is of whom he is speaking. He, leaning back on Jesus' bosom, said to him, Lord, who is it? So you can kind of understand that culture. That's what was going on back then. Now, paradise is also a word that is used in the New Testament. Luke 23, if you remember, when Jesus is dying on the cross, there's the two thieves on the cross. One of them says, hey, can I come into your kingdom? Verse 42, he said, Jesus, remember me when you come in your kingdom. And he said, truly, I say to you, today you shall be with me in paradise. 2 Corinthians 12:3-4, Paul talks about this. He apparently was transported to paradise. And he says, and I know how such a man, whether in the body or apart from the body, I do not know, but God knows I was caught up into paradise and heard inexpressible words which a man is not permitted to speak. So, putting all of this together, I'm not certain how it all works. It seems like Abraham's bosom and paradise are pretty much this one and the same thing. At this particular time, it's in a place called Hades. But then what happens when Jesus dies on the cross, I think it gets transported to a different place. I think what happens is that when Jesus dies on the cross, with this. Did I tell you already that I was going to make hell have vegetables in it? Did I tell you that? I was thinking, okay, if I'm putting chocolate over here, I'm putting vegetables. And then I realized some of you guys actually like vegetables, and you probably think hell, yeah, whatever. But anyway, so I'm going to show you why it seems like, and this is very odd, Jesus dies on the cross. He descends into Hades. It seems like he takes all the people out of the good side, the paradise, the Abraham's bosom, and puts them into heaven with him. But the problem is you don't know that, because the word paradise, it's one of those things. But here's where. Look at Ephesians 4. Therefore it says, when he, Jesus, ascended on high, he led captive a host of captives, and he gave gifts to men. Now this expression, he ascended, what does it mean except that he also descended into the lower parts of the earth? He who descended is himself, also he who ascended far above the heavens so he might fill all things. So when you see that verse that says he ascended, he led a captive of hosts, it's almost as if he went down there and he grabbed all the people in the good place and he brought them with him. Okay, I'm going to say to heaven, not really exactly certain how that all plays out. We're still souls. They don't have a body yet. Like I said, there's a lot I don't know, but I'm just kind of throwing all this stuff out and giving you the verses. The reason why is because Jesus has the keys to this Hades. Look at Revelation 1:17. When I saw him, I fell at his feet like a dead man. He placed his right hand on me and said, do not be afraid. I'm the first and the last and the living one. I was dead, and behold, I'm alive forever. And I have the keys of death and of Hades. So Jesus completely rules over Hades. He can do whatever he wants to do. 1 Peter 3:18 talks about when Jesus had gone down after his death. For Christ also suffered once for sins, the righteous for the unrighteous, that he might bring us to God, being put to death in the flesh, but made alive in the spirit, in which he went and proclaimed to the spirits in prison. So you see these little verses that allude to this thing that Jesus, when he died, he didn't just go up to the Father. He went down into Hades, and he preached, he did whatever, and then he took a host of captives, and he brought them out of Hades. And the only people now stuck down there are going to be the people in torment, the unbelievers. Look at John 20:17. Jesus has just now risen from the dead. I think Mary sees him. And Jesus said to her, "Stop clinging to me." This is John 20:17. "For I have not yet ascended to the Father." Now, to me, that was very interesting because it seems like when he raises from the dead, he just automatically goes up to heaven, but he doesn't. He goes, "I went down, got the captives, did whatever he did with them, got them to a safe place, and now I am here. I haven't ascended." And he stays around for 40 days, and then he ascends back up to the Father. It's a time thing. I don't honestly know. I wish I had better answers for you. But here's the good news. If you die today, okay, there's no more you're going to Hades. Now what happens if you and I die today, we're actually going to go to one place. It depends. If you're a follower of Jesus, you go here. And this is what 2 Corinthians says, "For we are confident, I say, and would prefer to be away from the body and at home with the Lord." When you and I die, we're away from our body, but we are somehow in the presence of God. And that's a good thing. And that's what I'm saying. That's why I think it's not there anymore, even though there was the presence of God at that particular time, but in a different sense. I think there's two different, it's kind of like last week when we talked Old Covenant, New Covenant. There's something that, and I don't understand it all, but the cool thing is if you and I die today knowing Christ, then we will go directly into the presence of the Lord. Look at Philippians 1:22. "But if I am to live in the flesh, this will mean fruitful labor for me, and I don't know which to choose, but I'm hard-pressed from both directions, having desire to depart to be with Christ, for that is very much better." He doesn't say, "I'm going to purgatory." He doesn't say, "I'm going to Hades." He doesn't say that. He goes, now I'm going directly to be with Christ and be in the presence of. So that's good news for us, of those of us that are followers of Jesus. Now, in the very, very back of your handout, I think, you should have a big illustration. It's a big colored illustration. There you go. He put it up there. This is to the best of my ability, which isn't very good, just an FYI. You should see, I tried to explain this to the guy who does all of our artwork, and when he finally got it done, he goes, "That was the hardest thing I've ever done," basically. And I said, "Try teaching it, okay? Trust me, you're just putting it on paper. I have to try to explain it." So here's the deal. If you look at the person over to the left, that person dies. Your body goes into the grave. Your spirit goes one of two places. This is pre-Jesus. Your spirit either went to paradise or into torment, like these two places up here. Then if you look down there by the grave, you see the cross and the resurrection. So now in between this time, Jesus dies, he raises from the dead, and he takes the people, and this is why it's hard to explain it. He takes the people from paradise, he takes them to heaven, wherever you want to call that, and then everyone else waits for the judgment day, and then the people at judgment day, if you're saved, you will spend eternity in heaven, and the lost people will spend eternity in hell. There may be a few things just that's just too difficult. But anyway, once you get to hell, this is what happens to Hades. Look at Revelation 20:11. This is at the very, very end. Jesus is talking. He says, "Then I saw a great white throne, and him who sat upon it, from whose presence earth and heaven fled away, and no place was found for them. And I saw the dead, the great and the small, standing before the throne, and the books were opened, and another book was opened, which is in the book of life, and the dead were judged from the things which were written in the books according to their deeds. And the sea gave up the dead which were in it," and get a load of this, "and death and Hades gave up the dead which were in them. And they were judged, every one of them, according to their deeds." And then, get a load of this, "Death and Hades were thrown into the lake of fire. This is the second death, the lake of fire. And if anyone's name was not found written in the book of life, he was thrown into the lake of fire." So Hades, this group of people over here, they went to judgment. They, of course, they never put their faith and trust in Jesus. They got dumped into this lake of fire forever and ever. Okay, so that's kind of the premise of everything that I can totally understand. Now, let's go back to our story. Verse 24. After Lazarus, the rich man sees Lazarus, he cries out, verse 24, and he says, Father Abraham, have mercy on me, and send Lazarus so that he may dip the tip of his finger in water and cool off my tongue, for I am in agony in this flame. But Abraham said, Child, remember that during your life you received your good things, and likewise Lazarus bad things. But now he is being comforted here, and you are in agony. Now, that's a pretty scary verse if you put that on your own, especially if you're rich and you have money and you're just like, what does that mean? Like I had good things on earth? And the answer to that is no. We looked through the rest of the Bible. Abraham was wealthy, Joseph was wealthy, Solomon was wealthy. So it has nothing to do with wealth. It has everything to do with this. He says there's righteous rich and righteous poor, and unrighteous rich and unrighteous poor. And this rich man was an unrighteous rich man. So there's both on both sides of that. And then look at what he says, verse 26. Now remember, this is before Jesus goes to the cross. He's telling this. And besides all this, between us and you, there is a great chasm fixed, so that those who wish to come over from here to you will not be able, and that none may cross over from us to them, or from there to us. So here's where we get into the whole idea of what hell is like. It's this idea of there's this great chasm, and you can never get out. Once you're there, you're stuck for eternity. And what you have to see is there's no second chances. I put little people there. They're just standing looking like, where did I go wrong? What did I do? Like, how come I knew about Jesus, but I just was too busy, or I didn't want to put my faith in him, or I just thought all religions led to God, or whatever it was. What happened? And now I'm stuck in here forever and ever and ever. And nothing to quench their thirst. And there's no hope. And it really sees that here they're conscious there, because he's trying to talk like, hey, go do something for me. Bring me some water. So it's conscious. It's a conscious way of living. It's horrifying. And as followers of Christ, we should be horrified by that. Look at Matthew 8:12. What else it says? But the sons of the kingdom will be cast out into outer darkness, in the place where there's weeping and gnashing of teeth. It's dark. There's crying. There's gnashing of teeth. Look at Job 10:21. Before I go, and I shall not return to the land of darkness and deep shadow, the land of utter gloom, as darkness is itself. So you kind of see it's this horrible dark. Mark 9:43 says that if your hand causes you to sin, cut it off. Hyperbole. It is better for you to enter life crippled than two hands to go to hell, to the unquenchable fire. Matthew 13:41, the Son of Man will send his angels, and they will gather out of his kingdom all causes of sin and all lawbreakers, and throw them into the fiery furnace, in the place that there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And you know what's sad is that we do not hear many sermons on hell today. Like, we just don't. Especially in the United States, we have minimized it so much. Somebody wrote this: hell, about which our fathers spoke so fervently, seems to have cooled off so much that it would make a fairly good summer resort. And I think that's so true. I think I minimize it. I just like this. That's why this lesson was so horrifying to me, because I finally saw where people go if they don't know Christ. I went online to say, what do people think about hell? And this is what someone said: imagine all the cocaine and hookers in hell, and you'll be stuck in heaven doing something stupid like bowling. Screw heaven and hell, someone says. I'm just going to stay on earth. Okay. Well, you and I, if you know the Bible, you know that those scenarios are not true. And these people who believe that will spend eternity in a horrifying, horrifying place. Now, what's interesting is the rich man in Hades, guess what he does? He becomes an evangelist. He becomes the Billy Graham of Hades. Look at what he says in verse 27. And he said, then I beg you, Father, that you send him to my father's house, for I have 5 brothers, in order that he may warn them, so they will also not come to this place. Bad news. After you die, there is no way to warn anyone. Good news. While you and I are still alive, all the family and friends and neighbors and people that we see at the gym or wherever, we still have a chance to get them saved and to get them into a relationship with Christ, so they never, ever have to spend this horrible time. Our job is to warn people. We got to get that. Long before September 11th, when the terrorist at the World Trade Center, there was a man by the name of Rick Rescorla. He was a 62-year-old head of security at Morgan Stanley. He in his mind, really believed that Osama bin Laden was going to have planes come into the towers. I don't know why he thought that, he just did, for some reason. And so he decided to keep the people at Morgan Stanley safe, and he made an evacuation plan. And he would go from floor to floor. He'd say, today we're having evacuation plan drill. And they would laugh at him, and they would mock him, and they would be angry with him because he was like bugging them during his workday. But I will tell you this, on September 11th, 2001, when American Airlines Flight 11 hit World Trade Center Tower 1 at 8:45, they were ready. And this Rick Rescorla, he ignored all the building officials who said, stay where you are, don't move. He said, forget that, we have a plan. And he said all 2,800 employees were out of the building by the time the second plane hit the second tower. And he said, they said the last time he was seen, he was heading up the stairs to the 10th floor to help other people. He said, out of the 2,800 people, only 6 died. 1 was him. 3 were deputies that were with him, and 2, I don't know who the other people were. But at the end of the day, the people from Morgan Stanley look back and they praise him, basically. They feel horrible for how awful they were to him. And all he wanted to do was be prepared to save their life in case something ever happened. And people said, we feel guilty because we thought he was foolish. And we thought that, he just was preaching something that would never happen. And he stood for what he believed, and he didn't care anyway. And he continually warned us and told us we have to find a way out. And he said, we are so grateful because he saved our life. And see, I think that's our job if we're followers of Jesus, to warn people, even though they think we're crazy. Because I will tell you, your family's going to think you're crazy. Your friends are going to think you're crazy. Your neighbors, that's just what's going to happen. And we have to get to the point to say, I don't care. I don't care if there's a rift in our relationship or if I hurt your feelings or I just don't want to push my beliefs on you. Yeah, we do. We really do. We have the only answer to people getting to heaven. That's it. So we have a job to do. It's not like we can just hold this within. If you had the cure to cancer, would you just hold it within? No. You would run around and tell everyone you have a cure for cancer. We have something even better, eternal life. I get to this point where I think people don't really want to know. But the other day, Rob and I went to a restaurant. We always go for breakfast, but we ended up going for lunch. She wanted to try that. And I always carry the Bible study pens. And so I had it in my purse, and so the waitress came up, and I said, hey, I don't know if you go to church anywhere. That's always what I ask first. Do you go to church anywhere? And she goes, no, I don't. And I said, well, here's a pen. It's a women's Bible study. If you ever, we're online. You don't even have to come. I said, but if you, want to know about God or whatever, you would have thought I just gave her $1 million. I can't tell you. She was so excited. She was like, are you serious? I can get this? I can watch it? Oh my gosh, thank you so much. Like the whole way out, she was like, thank you. And it dawned on me, people really do want to know. But we're so timid about it. We're so scared. Well, I don't want to hurt their feelings. Stop it. We have to stop that. We have the one and true answer in this life, and we've got to do something about it. Because I want you to think back on how you become a follower of Christ. Everybody has a story. Somebody invited you someplace. Somebody told you about Jesus somewhere. How grateful are you that happened? I think that's the thing. I think when I did this study, you know what it did for me? It made me so thankful. I couldn't get over the fact that I will never spend eternity in hell, ever. Because somebody shared the gospel with me, and God saved me. And I can't tell you what that did to me all week long. I kept saying, God, thank you. I don't know what I did to deserve this. I did nothing. But you love me and you saved me, and I have to tell people about this. I want us to look at people differently. I want us to look in our minds and say, you know what? Hell is a horrible place. Fire, torment, separation, agony, gnashing of teeth, consciousness, never getting out. And I want us tonight, because I think this is what it does, get on our knees and say, God, I will never experience that because you have been so gracious to me. That is what I loved about the movie Risen. I can't tell you, it was just like when you see someone's life who wanted nothing to do with God, and you see how God goes in and changes them, and all week long I said, God, that's how gracious you are. And each one of us, as we're a follower, we've got to take this seriously because there are billions of people in this world that don't know Jesus. And there's hundreds of people in your area, of social world, whatever you do. And we have the answer. We have to be able to open our mouth and tell people and give them something. That's why I've given every person a one-way book in front of you, and pens. Please that's your assignment for this week. Like people go, I don't want to do that. Do it. You never, ever know who that person you hand that to. I've told you the story a million times. We gave faith baskets out to a bunch of people. One guy out of probably 20 faith baskets that we put books and we put, a Bible and all these things. One guy, like 10 years later, he stuck everything in a closet because he wanted nothing to do with God. And one day he was cleaning out his closet and saw it, pulled out his Bible, read it through like 5 times, came to Jesus, and radically changed his life. Like, you don't know what a pen in someone's drawer will do. Maybe they'll go online. It's not about this Bible study. You know that. It's about, I always say, make your own pens. Give them cards to your own church. I couldn't care less. Do something. Because when they're ready, they'll come to you, or they'll look at that card, or they'll look at that pen, and they'll go, oh, maybe I should check that out. That's just what people do. Paul Little, in his little book, How to Give Away Your Faith, defines witnessing as this. Witnessing is that deep-seated conviction that the greatest favor I can do for others is to introduce them to Jesus Christ. It's the greatest thing we could ever do for anyone is to tell them about Jesus, but we are so worried about this life and our reputation, and I don't know what they're going to think about me, and what if they don't like me? Stop it. We literally have to stop that. Robert E. Lee was on a boat. Hundreds of people were aboard, and it caught fire. And so the captains told the first mate, he said, I want you to run down into the salon, run through the corridors, and tell every single person that the boat is on fire, they have to get out. And he said he didn't even have time to explain it as he was running through, boats on fire. And he said, here's what the response was. Some of the people were angry, so mad. You woke me up rudely. How could you do that to me? Some thought, they're just drunk, they're just a practical joker. No one took them serious. Some were amused and laughed, ha, that's so funny, until you could hear them screaming because they couldn't get out because of the fire. Others heard the warning, but you know what they did? They just couldn't really believe it. Like, this boat's probably too safe, it's not going to be on fire. And in another few minutes, they were swept up into death also. But there were some who heard the warning, and they took it seriously, and they got out, and they got saved. And see, that's exactly what happens with you and I when we tell people about Jesus. You're going to get all those response. You're going to get people who are going to laugh at you. You're going to get people who are going to be like, I'm just going to wait until I get my life in order. No, don't. Okay, you never know what's going to happen. We had 2 people in the last probably 4 months that I know that died in accidents, and they were in their 20s. Okay, you don't have all life. You don't know when your life is going to end. So that's what I'm saying. Today, please understand that Jesus is the only way, and we have the answer. We've got to get it out, because there's some people that get it, and we need to be the ones that tell them about it so that they can make that decision for Christ. Because the boat is on fire, and time is running out, and we got to get that. Now, for the rich man, the story, time had run out for him. Look at verse 29. Abraham said, they have Moses and the prophets, let them hear them. But he said, no, Father Abraham, if someone goes to them from the dead, they will repent. But look what he says. But he said, they do not listen to Moses and the prophets. They will not be persuaded, even if someone rises from the dead. Now, Jesus says this knowing that he is going to rise from the dead. And see, that's the thing, is that God has given us so much. He's given us, we are created in his image, eyes to see and ears to hear, and we see creation and galaxies and moons and crocodiles and whales and babies. And for this rich man, God gave him the Torah and Moses and told him everything he needed to know, but nobody cared. And they spent eternity over there. I think it's so interesting that he says people won't even believe it if you tell them that he rose from the dead. Here we have Jesus prophesied in the Old Testament, fulfilled in the New Testament, historically, like literally takes our calendar and splits it down the middle, AD, BC. I know the world's trying to change that, but that's actually what it was at the particular time. And billions of people know that. And they still refuse to believe. And that's what Jesus says. Even if someone rises from the dead, they're still not going to believe. And see, that is what's horrifying to me. I want us to be like Peter and John. Peter and John had an encounter with Jesus, and you'll see this. It changes their life. When he rose from the dead, before he rose from the dead, they were like, he died, we're scared, and they ran. The minute they saw him and he rose from the dead, everything changed. It was a life-changing event for them, and they could not keep quiet about it. See, we're so mundane about our faith. We need to look at it for what it is. We are one of the very few on that narrow road that know Jesus, and we have something to tell other people. In Acts 3, Peter and John, they heal a beggar, and they don't really, everyone starts following him. Thousands of people come to Jesus in one day because they suddenly see that this lame beggar is healed. And you know what happens? The religious people, Caiaphas, Annas, all the high priests, they get together. What are we going to do with this little sect of people that say Jesus is risen? And so they put him in jail, and then they brought him out. And they said, what are we going to do with you? You need to stop preaching. Look what Acts 4, Peter gets up and he preaches to them. Now think about this. This is about what? A couple months maybe after Jesus has been crucified? They're still crucifying people in Rome. Aren't they terrified that if they go in front of Annas and Caiaphas that they're going to be crucified too? They don't care, because Jesus has so changed their life that nothing is ever going to be the same for them again. Look at what he gets up and says. Then Peter, remember Peter, like scared, running away from everyone, Peter? Okay, Peter, filled with the Holy Spirit, said to them, rulers and elders of the people, if we are being called in account for an act of kindness shown to a cripple and are asked how he was healed, then know this, you and all the people of Israel, it is by the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, whom you crucified, but whom God raised from the dead, and that this man stands before you healed. Salvation is found in no one else, and there is no other name under heaven given to men by which we must be saved. When they saw the courage of Peter and John and realized they were unschooled, ordinary men, they were astonished, and they took note that these men had been with Jesus. Then they called them in again and commanded them not to speak or teach at all in the name of Jesus. But Peter and John said, judge for yourself whether it's right in God's eyesight to obey you rather than God, for we cannot help speaking what we have seen and heard. That should be us. We have to look at our life and say, God, am I so scared that I'm going to lose my family and my friends? Am I so afraid that someone's going to throw me in jail? Am I so fearful of that? Or are we going to be like Peter and John? Tell me not to talk. I don't care what you say. Throw me in jail. It doesn't matter. Something has happened in my life. The risen Savior has come into my life and changed me, and I will never be the same, and I will never, ever spend any time talking about anything other than him. Because people are dying and they're going to hell, and once they get there, there's no escape ever. And that should terrify us. And I will tell you, this is me. I minimize hell. I minimize the horror of it. I don't want to bother people. I learned a lot from this lesson. I look around. Yesterday I walked into a nail place, and they were giving this like Buddha thing food. And it made me sick to my stomach. And I can't even speak their language. And I went into another nail place the other day and just started, gave them a one-way book in Vietnamese. And I had a Rick Warren Purpose-Driven Life in Vietnamese. I'm like, we've got to get out there. We've got Spanish one-ways. We've got Vietnamese one-ways. Please start handing them out. Take the pens. Do whatever you have to do. And here's 4 things. And I know we're going over, and I'm so sorry. I'm stopping here in like 2 minutes. What do we do? First, you recognize it. Say, God, I don't really care that much about other people. Please change my heart. 2, fall in love with Jesus. You have to fall in love with him to understand him. You've got to see what he did in Risen, see what he does to people and how he changes lives. And the more you do that, the more you will love him, and you'll have the passion to go out and tell people about him. Ask him to give you his eyes and his heart. Look at how Jesus felt about people in Matthew 9:36. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them because they were harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. Do we look at the people around us and say, they're so helpless? They have no sheep. They're just sheep without a shepherd. And we have the answer for that. Look in Matthew 23:37, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you who kill the prophets and stone those who sent you, how often I have longed to gather your children together under her wing, but you were not willing. We have something to say. And then 4, do something. Take the one-way book, take a pen, figure something out. Everywhere you go, do something to rescue one person out of hell, because hell is real and it's scary. And if you don't know Jesus today, I'm telling you, he's the only way to get from there to there. That's just the way it is. I can't make that better for you. He says he's the only way to God. So if you don't know him, today's the day. Say, Jesus, come in my life. It's really simple. Pick up a Bible, go to church, not because those things make you spiritual. They just help you get to know Jesus more. And I'm going to end with this one thing, because this some of you have a sick stomach right now. Because some of you have people that you know that have died and they didn't know Jesus. And this terrifies you, because now you have seen what's going on in their life. And people will ask, how do I recognize it? How will I be in heaven and knowing that my husband, father, kid, whatever is living in hell? And here's what I think. Revelation 21:4 says this: He will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the order of things the old order of things have passed away. And so I want to just tell you that I don't know the answer to that. I just know the answer is you won't cry and you won't be sad and there will be no weeping. I don't know if God blocks that from your memory. I don't know if when you get to heaven you understand it all more fully. I don't know. But for those of you that think you can never live in heaven knowing somebody else is in hell, I think you don't need to worry about that anymore. I think you need to just go on and say, God, you're just going to have to take whatever is in my broken heart and make that. But what it should do is push us to talk to all the other people around us that don't know him. Father, thank you for this lesson today. Thank you for what it's done in my life. I pray, God, that you will change each one of us, that we will walk out of here with renewed desire to go out and share you with other people, knowing that this isn't just a game. This is eternity, forever and ever with no end. And God, I pray for our loved ones and the people that were desperate to get them saved. I pray, God, that you would do a work in their life. Thank you for these women. God, I don't even know how to end this. Thank you for Jesus. Amen. Jesus, I'm going to keep reiterating this. The storms in your life are not a surprise to God. That whatever you're going through right now, God is doing something upstream that you have no idea. You can't see what he's doing. The reason why this is so important is because eternity is, and the Bible does not say that. So what I'm saying is we have to get back to being Bible. This is my one point that I want to make. Remind me, God, that it's all about you.